Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rose Political Podcast. My name is Alejandro Ramos, and I am your host. I'm joined again today by Dr. Gary L. Rose, Chair of the Department of Government here at Sacred Heart University, and frequent media commentator. Dr. Rose, how are you doing today?
How you doing, Alejandro? Here we go again.
Thank you.
Good.
Here we are.
Yep.
Today's podcast is going to be on Trump and everything going on in the primaries and a little bit of that. So let's jump right into it.
Sure.
I'll ask you the first question. Why do you think he announced so early in the primary? Because this is not typical for a presidential candidate to come out right after the midterms, especially with the big Georgia race pending, and make an announcement like this.
Yeah, I know. And there were those who were really upset that he did announce with the Georgia race, as you say, pending. And the question is, will it cost Herschel Walker, the opportunity to win that seat? I think there is actually some concern about that, and very real legitimate concern, too. Nevertheless, I think the reason that Trump has endorsed so early, or has come out so early and announced, is largely Ron DeSantis. I think that's the reason. And I think he felt it was time to, because there has been a lot of momentum developing for DeSantis, certainly. And certainly, DeSantis had a great night down in Florida there, and the election results were fantastic for him.
Absolutely.
And so I think that really he felt it was time to kind of scare some others, out of running.
Yeah.
And maybe what better way to do that than to get a head jump and a head start on this campaign, and maybe that could, kind of thin the ranks very quickly.
Sure.
However, I will say that I think that his strategy is not going to work, and I do believe there's going to be a proliferation of Republican candidates in the days ahead, which I think we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
So I believe it was, to your question directly, to answer it, it was to really dissuade, I think, some other candidates from getting in the race, and to really just kind of blunt what is the DeSantis juggernaut right now.
Sure. I found it, again, very interesting, especially with the Georgia race. And like you said, a lot of people do have concerns, jumping into the race, especially when we have this big election still going on in Georgia, that, is he going to tip the election one way or another? And we'll talk about it later. Here I have some facts and some figures about how his impact in the midterm election affected different candidates, both in the House and the Senate. Yeah. So we'll get into that. Yeah. But thank you very much for your answer on that.
A very mixed review in terms of his importance in this election. Some of his candidates, as you will point out, did very well, and others not so well.
Yeah. And I have to say, with his announcement, there were a lot of people that, his fans, the Trumpers, that have been, because I've been reading the commentary on social media, they're saying that it wasn't really him. I don't know if you saw his announcement.
Wasn't really him.
But that he was very dialed back and he was very poised compared to how he normally is. Well, a lot of people were saying.
I see what you mean. Yeah, I watched it. Yeah. I made a point of watching it. It wasn't, covered by the mainstream networks. It was on, of course, Fox, not surprisingly. But even then, towards the end of the presentation, the reporters started speaking, to one another about it. What was the big difference was that he didn't air his grievances about the last presidential election, and many thought that he was going to continue to talk about, the steal that took place, and how how the election was illegitimate, and that he won by a large margin, as he's been saying time and time again. Mm-hmm. So when I watched it, I was waiting to hear him, make this claim, but he did not. Sure. And essentially, he focused on many of the things he did as president. Yeah. And quite frankly, there are a number of very important accomplishments that President Trump is associated with during his 4 years in office. But everything has changed since, of course, January 6, 2021, and that's when his reputation is nowhere near as secure as it once was, even in Republican circles.
Absolutely.
But that's what kind of speech it was. And it was critical of the Biden presidency. Of course, there were some jabs and some humor, but a lot of it was really a laundry list of his accomplishments. And there were many, quite frankly. But that was then, and this is now.
Yeah. Do you think that another reason why he might not have been, his crazy fiery self was because he's being so compared to Ron DeSantis, and Ron DeSantis is able to, he has those fiery moments, but he knows when it's appropriate and when it's not. Do you think that might have been another reason because of the comparisons, the two of them are always constantly being compared?
Well, I'm sure Trump reads the polls, too,
yeah.
and what people feel about him right now, particularly registered Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure he, after reading those polls, being very aware of what many of the Republican Party's rank and file now feel about him, that he felt a more civil presentation was needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't say that Donald Trump is capable of reinventing himself. He's not. But at the same time, I think we are going to see during this campaign, and he has declared, I think, somewhat of a different type of message. I do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And right before the show, Dr. Rose, in our pre-show talk, you had mentioned the Republican Jewish Coalition meeting that happened in Las Vegas not too long ago.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about, what happened at this meeting and, what you saw and what your thoughts were on what you were able to watch and read.
Yeah. Well, this is an annual meeting that the Republicans have, and this is essentially where you get an opportunity to see who is thinking about running for president, and and the types of speeches they give and so forth. And so, this particular convention this time was particularly relevant because we do have a lot of different individuals thinking about running for president. So this was an opportunity for them to speak, showcase themselves, and perhaps even start appealing to donors. Mm-hmm. And this was a very important conference that took place. So I watched it, and I watched all the speeches, and sure enough, there is a long list of Republicans who appeared there, and they spoke, and they all sounded very presidential, and DeSantis got the most applause, of course, huge, in fact. Trump did not actually attend. He appeared on video to speak. But certainly we had DeSantis there. We had Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State. We certainly had Mike Pence speaking. We had Chris Sununu, who had a big win up in New Hampshire, the governor of New Hampshire. And there were others who spoke too, Nikki Haley. Mm-hmm. And you could see that this was really sort of the first opportunity for a number of these people to start showcasing themselves to the Republican rank and file.
Absolutely.
And it was televised, and so a lot of voters, I'm sure a lot of Republicans tuned in to watch it. Mm-hmm. And so it was very interesting to watch, and so let the 2024 race begin. That's what this is.
Yeah.
This is what it is.
This is the start of it all.
You know what we really call this in political science, those who really write about elections, as I have too. But there was a very influential book that was published a while back, and it was all about the invisible primary. Mm-hmm. And in what goes on. I'm trying to remember if it was a book or an article, but nevertheless, it was the invisible primary, and it's all about what goes on before the actual start of the nominating process. And this is when you can start to see who the candidates are, and they start to make their move. They show up at like the Las Vegas convention here that you just mentioned. Mike Pence has a book out. Mm-hmm. So Help Me God is the title of the book, and so you're going to see more books published and interviews, and so this is the invisible primary where people start to jockey and maneuver for position and start to get known. And so you can see it starting right there at the convention you mentioned. It was obvious to me what they were, Mike Pompeo speaking. Chris Christie showed up and spoke too. And I thought Chris Christie, quite frankly, gave, at least this is just my judgment, the best speech of all.
Really?
I did like what he said, and I think he said something that was extremely important, and let me just, I don't know if there's a direct quote or I paraphrase him, but he did say it's time for the Republican Party to be the party of we and not the party of me, mm-hmm. meaning Donald Trump
Absolutely.
is all about me.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great speech. And it's
I
true.
think so too.
It really is true that it's time for that party to, really have a big tent and look at all the talent that's within that party, and to stop this, what I consider to be this cult-like reverence for him. And that's troubling to me.
It is.
So I thought Christie's speech was definitely the best. Now the question is Christie running for president? Why was he there?
Sure.
I
find it very interesting. All these people that, in the past were considered his allies or his big, his bulldogs that were going out there and giving speeches for him and stuff, very quickly have turned against him.
Yeah.
And I think the main reason is, of course, January 6th.
Yeah.
I think that was a very dark day for our democracy.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see this now. Chris Christie, that was, such a big fighter for him.
Yeah.
Mike Pence has been doing interviews and has right away gone, he's backing off, is keeping his hands off. Mitch McConnell, in a speech not too long ago, said, I am not getting involved with this primary. I'm just going to sit back and watch. So people before that, that had his back, and people today that still have influence to impact the election going one way or another, I find it very interesting that, that they're just taking that, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to see what happens approach. But we'll have to see what happens with that.
Yeah, well, it's very difficult to get behind anybody right now and to start casting endorsements and so forth.
Of course.
Yeah, and it would not be wise and politically savvy for individuals to start endorsing candidates and getting involved this early. But eventually they will.
Oh, they will.
But right now it's too premature, I think, to make that move. And I think they're going to be watching polls themselves to decide who they're going to back.
But I think there's a big difference in between, of course, making a formal endorsement, but then coming out and making attacks against him. Pence and Christie at this point would look, a little ridiculous now going back and saying, we endorsed Trump after Pence has said, I think it's time for my former boss to sit this one out.
He said it's time to move on. Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. So I think that's, although they're not endorsements, they are anti-endorsements.
Anti-endorsements.
Right. So I find those very interesting because right away you're setting up the invisible primaries happening, but then you're walking right into the primaries, and it's no one has picked a side, but you've picked a side that you don't want to be on, which to me is very interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are going to be multiple sides in this race.
Sure.
That's going to be forthcoming, and just keep your eye on Iowa and New Hampshire and take a look at. You'll see, people there flipping burgers out there and going to the Iowa State Fair.
Yeah.
That's the big one.
Yeah.
And then up in New Hampshire, you're going to see them, making visits. And so we're going to know who the candidates are very soon because it all starts after the midterm election. Yeah. That's when the next.
Now that is when it starts ramping up.
Yeah, the presidential race is really underway. So, this convention that took place in Las Vegas. What you cited, the Republican Jewish Coalition Leadership Meeting is what it was called. That's kind of the start of it. Yeah. And then now we're going to see who's making plans to go to the very early caucus and primary states and visits as well to South Carolina, I'm sure, because they have an early primary, and then in Nevada where a very important caucus could take place. So it's going to be fascinating to watch, but everyone is starting to make their move now. Some names that were out there already, individuals have said, no, I'm not running. Mm-hmm. But, that doesn't mean they're not potential vice presidential candidates too,
Yeah.
So
I think that's the interesting thing too, is that, you read these articles and different polls and whatnot, and, candidates right away or other politicians that hold other positions say, oh, well, I'm not running for president. But that's an important point, to keep into consideration is sure, you're not running for president, but you might be living in the observatory, right? So we'll have to see on whether or not they decide to, keep their name on the short list for vice president. Let me ask you a question. In 2036, are you coming up with me to the Iowa State Fair to flip burgers with me?
Oh, I'll be there to see you.
Okay, good. Yeah. I'll be hoping to see you there.
All right, that'll be my next book.
So I wanted to touch a little bit, Dr. Rose, on the candidates. I have a long list here of Republicans that might jump into this race and who we think we could beat him. So just a few of them. We have Liz Cheney, who lost her seat. She was a congresswoman, sat on the January 6th hearings. and really spearheaded a lot of that, is no longer Congresswoman, but it's a big name in politics, and I don't think she has any plans on going anywhere anytime soon.
I don't know what she's doing, but I would say this right now, and I can predict this: Liz Cheney would not make it to first base.
No.
In a Republican contest. No, absolutely not. Even though there are a number of anti-Trump Republicans.
You don't think she would be the one to capture them?
I don't think they would rally behind her.
Okay.
And, even individuals who don't like Trump and they're anti-Trump, some of them felt that Liz Cheney was simply too collaborative
with the Democrats.
With the Democratic committee. They're much too collaborative, and while many Republicans feel Trump was culpable for January 6th, 2021, they still didn't like the fact that Cheney was so aggressive about this. And so I don't see her really getting very far. Where she could potentially have impact, though, is a third party.
Yeah.
I think that's a possibility. But
do you think she would be able to pull any Democrat votes or not?
She might. I mean, she could be a spoiler at the most. She would never win.
Yeah.
But Liz Cheney, I do not believe would make it very far at all in the Republican contest today.
Sure. And then a few governors that are here on the list. Yeah. One of them, obviously, the top that we have to talk about is Ron DeSantis. He's, number one. Another former governor is Nikki Haley.
Yep.
That she was an ambassador as well. That has kind of thrown her things into the mix. Larry Hogan, he was just term limited in Maryland.
Yep.
Is a very moderate Republican. And then we also have Chris Sununu.
Oh yes.
Up in New Hampshire.
Yeah, he was there. He spoke. Yep.
Former Governor Chris Christie. And then we have Greg Abbott. And Glenn Youngkin down, in Texas and in Virginia. What are your thoughts on some of those names and who could really, throw a wrench into Trump's run for the presidency?
Well, then another name, too, is Asa Hutchinson.
Asa Hutchinson, yes.
Of Arkansas.
Yes.
And so governor who's going to be replaced by,
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Sarah Huckabee, yeah. And which is interesting, former Governor Huckabee and his daughter now. But anyways, you got to keep coming back to DeSantis.
Yeah.
Of all the names you just listed, it has to be DeSantis, based on what, his tremendous reelection in Florida. And now all the national polls are showing, too, that many Republicans like him and are rallying behind him.
Do you think there would be any world, Dr. Rose, where he wouldn't run?
Well, I listened to his speech in Las Vegas, and I'll tell you, it's certainly when he says, I've just begun to whatever he said, I've just begun to really get to work here. We have a lot going. We have a lot to do. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but it was so obvious to me, okay, he's really going to run for president. And, I think DeSantis, quite frankly, could clear the field.
Yeah.
I do. A lot of those names you just mentioned, I just have a feeling that if he really does make a formal declaration and then you have Trump going, I think the field would thin out pretty quickly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, then we have other people on the list, a few senators. Well, of course, we have Mike Pence. I failed to mention Mike Pence, former vice president. But then we have senators like Tim Scott, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Rick Scott down in Florida. I don't really think any of these names could compete with Trump. But then, it would be interesting, and I know Trump has already announced that he's running for president. And this was just a thought that came into my head. Do you think that there's any chance that he would see the polls that he's doing so poorly and would withdraw from the primaries?
Donald Trump?
Yeah. Or
withdraw?
You think he would go straight through just to feed
I think he'd go all the way through.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question you asked, too, about primaries. At least my thoughts are that, he declared early in order to kind of blunt the DeSantis movement. But at the same time, if it's Trump versus DeSantis, that would be one heck of a contest. It really would. It would be advantageous to Trump, of course, if there were multiple candidates in the race, because I believe DeSantis can actually beat him in key primaries. But to have multiple candidates in the race, that could, I think, help Trump, because then to win a primary, what percentage of the vote do you really need? And to win delegates, too, because The Republicans, it all depends. It's difficult to get into this now because I haven't taken a look at the rules yet for 2024. But in some of the contests, it'll be proportionality, like 15%, 20%. You start qualifying for delegates. In others, it'll be winner take all, And so I think a lot of it depends on what the rules are and what states are having winner take all versus proportionality. That's because rules are never neutral and always has a great deal of impact on it. Yeah. But Trump versus DeSantis would be a great matchup to watch. But I do think that if there's a lot of candidates who stay in the race, then Trump could actually win a sizable share of delegates in a proportionality type of contest.
Yeah. And do you think the rules will be stacked against him, against Trump, because of, and we'll get into this later, but his impact on the party that he's had, it hasn't always been positive, especially recently. Do you think those rules will be made so that they, don't favor him as much?
Yeah, well, again, the rules, they always say rules are never neutral.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen the rules yet. I'm not sure the rules are necessarily going to be stacked against Trump. I think they're going to be probably as fair as possible to at least some of the leading contenders. So again, I would have to actually look at the rules to see the nominating rules and how they break down per state to really answer that definitively. Okay. But I don't. I'm not sure that the Republican rules are going to be drafted in a way that favor one candidate over another. Often they say they're not neutral, but this time around, I'm not sure they're going to discriminate against Trump. I don't think so. No, I think that he's going to be a viable candidate. But as far as actually winning the nomination, I think DeSantis could really take him on and beat him. I do.
And so would you say that it would be wise for other Republicans to not jump into the race if they see that, it's Trump, DeSantis, maybe throw in another, two or three of them?
Yeah.
But the last time we had this huge, we had this giant stage, podiums from left to right, and, the camera would zoom out and you would still have the two people at the end not in the shot. Yeah. So do you think it would be wise for, if we...
To rally behind one, yes, that would be very wise. And I think if I was being consulted on this, I would say that the fewer candidates in that race, the better it is for DeSantis.
Yeah.
But just to go toe-to-toe with Trump, then I think you're in for a real fight.
Absolutely.
But if you could get the other candidates to... rally behind DeSantis, pull out of the race, so it's just those two standing. That definitely favors DeSantis. But to stay in the race, and again, everybody getting a share of the delegates, Trump could, get maybe 30% and still maybe, get delegates and start rolling up delegates. And who knows? Here's another scenario. Alejandro, if in fact all these candidates that we just identified, and there's even more too, if they all stayed in the race, and if the Republican rules were not just winner take all, but a lot of proportionality, you could go into a national convention with no one with the majority of delegates.
Yeah.
If in fact the Republicans allow for proportionality. Again, I don't know how many states are going to allow for that. They did last time.
That would be interesting, because then you would have a lot of backroom deals.
Then you would have the brokered convention.
Yeah.
And God, wouldn't I love to watch that?
I think that would be great.
Yeah, I know. I've always wanted to see one. The last brokered conventions we had were in the 1950s, and but we haven't had brokered conventions since then. It's always, the front runner in the primary always gets the nomination, and we pretty much know the convention rubber stamps. But wouldn't that be fascinating if
I think it would
if we had DeSantis winning delegates and Trump winning delegates, and then Nikki Haley winning a handful of delegates, Chris Sununu getting a handful of delegates, Pompeo, Mike Pence, and then going into the convention without a without
like a nominee that already know what's happening.
Yeah, without a majority of the delegates. But that won't happen. I think it'll thin. And I don't like to predict stuff this far out, but I am thinking that we're going to see it thin, and it could be just DeSantis versus Trump.
Sure. And let me ask you this. What do you think would be better for DeSantis? Whether less people jump into the race right from the get-go, and then you have, let's say 5 candidates in this primary, or for all these people to jump into the race and then little by little for them to start dropping and endorsing him?
Yeah, I think
what do you think would do him better?
That strategy, I think, looks much better. Let everybody in, show that it's an open tent.
Absolutely.
Let voters see who they are, and voters like a number of those other people too, I'm sure. And then to have them rally behind, say, a DeSantis candidacy,
sure,
and then of course they would bring their voters with them to that. And so I think that would be advantageous to DeSantis to have a very open tent, large tent to begin with, and then have all the endorsements, and then it almost would look as if it's Trump up against the Republican Party.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And let me ask you this, Doctor, and I know it's too early to, to figure this out, but if it's not DeSantis, who else do you think, out of all these names, and again, the list keeps on going, and there were a few of them that I didn't mention, who of these candidates could go toe-to-toe with Trump, based on their personality, their accomplishments, and, how they could captivate the vote within the Republican Party?
Well, there's a couple that come to mind right away. Glenn Youngkin, who Trump says, gee, his name sounds Chinese. A derogatory thing to say about someone, of course. But of course, the people laughed. His crowd laughs at stuff like that.
Why make a comment like that?
Yeah, it's just inappropriate, very inappropriate. But right away, trying to degrade who it could be a potential candidate. Yeah. And Youngkin's win in Virginia as governor, that could serve as a real launching pad. And he's so, in favor of parental rights over education, and that's a huge issue.
That is a big issue.
So I think he could actually, take Trump on. I do. That would be an interesting contest. So you also asked, who else? Well, I can't ignore Mike Pence. Mike Pence, it was his finest moment on January 6th when he announced, when he stuck with the electoral vote and didn't turn it back to the states as the protesters, the mob, I should say, wanted him to do. And furthermore, Mike Pence has a very strong base among conservative Christians, born-again Christians and evangelicals. And as you know from taking my political parties class, and I'm sure you remember this lecture, right? That's a very strong component of the Republican Party these days.
Yeah. And that's why Pence was chosen as
that's right. President. That's exactly right. Yeah. And they had to balance that out and to bring them in. And they like Pence. I think Pence could actually I think Mike Pence could challenge him. He's not very charismatic, but he does come across as extremely solid. You know what I mean? Midwestern, Indiana, and a real solid type, individual. And I think people might like that.
And what about Nikki Haley? Because she's been someone that I've always liked.
Nikki. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I know. She was at the convention. She spoke. She did a good job. And I noticed she's been on TV quite a bit.
She is. She's doing a lot of interviews. Yeah. I think she might have released a book not too long ago as well.
You're right. I think she did. Yeah. Nikki Haley, I'm not sure she's got the the force and power when she speaks, though.
Sure.
That could really captivate a lot of male white Republican voters.
Yeah.
She's Indian American. She's got a great story. Governor.
She has a good track record as well.
UN ambassador and all of that. She's got a great resume. But I'm not sure, as I watched her up on stage the other night, compared to the other guys who were speaking, it just didn't strike me as one with the right charisma and strength and power that I know a lot of Republican voters like.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think she's a highly qualified individual, and I think she would have to be on the short list as a running mate for sure for whoever wins the nomination. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
But,
and for Trump, I know it's been floated, and I think this would be crazy, for Marjorie Taylor Greene to be vice president.
Good God.
I know that we just talked about the short list.
Yeah.
But who, and I think that would be absolutely insane. But because imagine giving someone like that a bigger platform.
That would be awful.
That would be awful.
Oh, I know.
I don't know. Just the thought of that gives me,
somebody, talking about QAnon and things like that. That would just be just insanity to have somebody like that on the ticket with you.
I think I would move out of the country.
But it is interesting because we have had some vice presidential selection or running mates, chosen in the past who have been, who stuff appears and it surfaces after they're chosen.
Yeah.
And it has really hurt candidacies.
Yeah.
But picking somebody like that already.
Well, she's a nut job, and you're going
absolutely.
into it.
No.
I think that would be, but for Trump, who do you think would be
who
a top
would I
running
advise?
mate?
Who would I
advise? If the candidates would call you, Dr. Rose, we want your help. Who would you advise for Trump?
Bring me into the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, my choice, if I was to pick a running mate for Trump, I think I would have to go with Tim Scott.
Tim Scott.
South Carolina Senator, African American.
Yes.
And persons of color are gravitating slowly but surely to the Republican Party. I've been tracking that. Yeah. Black voters, Hispanic and Latino voters in a big way, and Tim Scott has a great story, a great personal story. He's a highly ethical, great senator. Everybody likes Tim Scott.
Yeah.
So to me, that would be a nice balance.
Okay.
I don't think you necessarily have to balance it in terms of gender, but I do think that race would be a very important balancing act. So that's so when I'm called in, that's who I would advise. And Tim Scott himself, he might be running too.
Yeah. And how about for DeSantis? Who would you advise? You're called into both camps. DeSantis calls you, says, "Hey, who do I pick for vice president? Who would you advise for him?"
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting one because, right away you think of Tim Scott, but then on the other hand, that becomes a southern ticket.
Yeah.
Florida, South Carolina, very southern. But I'm not so sure that the regional issue is as big as it used to be. When you pick running mates, you at one time we always tried to strike some type of regional balance. Trump, Mondale, Georgia, Minnesota, and we've always had that was like. Then you've had Dukakis from Massachusetts and Lloyd Benson from Texas, and Kennedy Johnson, of course. There's the Boston-Austin connection again, as they say. So, so I might advise. But then you see like. Bill Clinton picked Al Gore. Yeah. That was Arkansas, Tennessee, and it was a very winning ticket. So I think, once again, Tim Scott, I would say a DeSantis Tim Scott ticket would be very appealing to the American people. And then maybe then you could also think about Mike Pompeo. Mm-hmm. I think he could be a very good running mate, too. He seems more like a vice president anyway.
He does. Yeah.
You know what I mean? When he's up there, he doesn't seem presidential to me, but Secretary of State, former Kansas congressman. So, you got some good balance there. Yeah. And you got foreign policy credentials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Kristi Noem?
Oh, yeah. South Dakota. Mm-hmm. Yeah, her name was out there quite a bit.
I believe, if I'm correct, she said she didn't plan on running.
But she said she's not running. She could be a potential candidate, but Kristi Noem does not really, well, this is just my judgment. Again, when she speaks, she just doesn't seem to have the force, or the charisma, but she's solid. But again, her name could be out there. I can't ignore that. Mm-hmm. But her stock seems to have gone down lately.
It has.
For a while there, it was.
Well, she was very up high.
And at the convention,
especially during the lockdown,
and
COVID lockdown and everything, she was way up here. But now the media talks less and less and less.
Less and less, and then she says she's not going to run. Yeah. So, and she did speak at the convention, when it was virtual. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And so she got some high marks there. But then she seems to have, for all intents and purposes, receded. As being presidential timber. Yeah. So her name didn't come to mind for me, although you mentioned her, and I think that's, she could be on a short list. Yeah. But again, when I'm called in, I wouldn't recommend her. Okay. I don't see it.
What about Chris Sununu?
Yeah, now there's New Hampshire.
Yeah. Or like a Glenn Youngkin, one of them to be the last time it was Tim Kaine from Virginia, senator, picked for Hillary.
But here's the issue with Sununu and Youngkin.
Yeah.
If you're talking about maybe balancing a ticket with DeSantis, then you're talking about two governors.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I think with DeSantis, sorry to cut you off, Dr. Rose, but I think his running mate needs to have experience with foreign policy.
Well, that's where Pompeo, I think, comes in, and that's why I keep, his name, I think, would be clearly at the top of any short list as a running mate. And he hasn't been involved in any controversy to speak of. A little bit at one time. They felt that he was using his position abroad for political purposes, to endorse, but that's over. That's water under the bridge now. So, I think foreign policy, you'd have to give Pompeo again. I come back to him too. Tim Scott, Pompeo, I think they're all good. Yeah. But, again, you don't want to have two governors running together.
That was my only reason why I had floated Nikki Haley, because she has the foreign policy experience.
Well, there's another,
and him, and you would have you would balance the ticket, both with race and gender.
Yeah, you got the race and the gender and the foreign policy part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Nikki, I don't see her as presidential, but again, she would be on certainly my short list if I was considering. I kind of like the other candidates better, but on the other hand. Nikki Haley, certainly a very credible person, sure.
Yeah. And she has some of what you need in this election, I think.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
And now, we've been talking about the Republicans. We talked about the impact of multi-candidate primaries. Now let's talk about the Democrats.
Okay.
Who could go, obviously Biden has said time and time again that he plans on rerunning. And typically you don't have a contender in primaries when a president says that they're going to rerun, but his approval ratings are low. I think that the Democratic Party is fractured enough that there is the possibility of someone coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to shake things up and I'm going to run. And I think they could give Biden a run for his money. So, and I know, top of the list already, I know the name that you're going to say, but who are some of the people that you think could not only beat Biden in the Democratic primary, but could go toe-to-toe with Trump in a general election, either Trump or DeSantis?
Well, you know who I'm going to say.
I know.
Gavin Newsom.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Gavin Newsom. And there's an awful lot of talk about him.
Yeah.
And, I remember when Biden was out of the country, Newsom made a visit to the White House. Yeah. Remember that? I'm not sure exactly why he was there.
Not sure either.
And then he came out with his... he had his coat off, white shirt, loose tie, sleeves flipped up a little, if I remember correctly, and the press was all hollering at him, and he was waving and smiling, and right away I'm hearing people say, there's something Kennedy-esque about him, you know what I mean? And the other day I was having a conversation with a sociology professor here.
Sure.
And she's a very strong supporter of Gavin Newsom. And I said, why? And so she said that, well, all the good things he's done for California. And I thought, every time I see California, it seems like homeless people are all over the place.
Yeah.
But what he's done? But then there was something else she said, and I had two female students in my office at the time. She said, also, he's got charisma and he's so good looking. And I looked to the two students. I said, do you think that's true? And they said, the two female students, yes, he is. He is great good looking. But I went home that night and I said to my wife, you think Gavin Newsom is good looking? She said, no, not at all.
We're going to have to take a poll in class when we leave here.
But I know that he's been spreading money around a lot.
Oh, he has.
Yes, he has.
Yeah.
A big super PAC there that he's been, he's building IOUs within his party. So, Reagan came out of California. Yeah. Yes, it's true. And Gavin Newsom right now is getting a lot of coverage. Sure. And a lot of people are talking about him as the next Democratic candidate for president. So I have to say, and you knew I was going to say,
I knew it,
that Gavin Newsom would be the logical person who I think could really take Biden on in a contest.
Yeah. There's a few other names here that I think are worth mentioning. First, Vice President Kamala Harris.
Okay,
I don't think she would go toe-to-toe with Biden. I mean, they have the same platform. I mean, not the same platform, but they work together. She's his vice president.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that would really be something that would pan out.
Well, something else, let me just say, even if Biden decides not to run, Kamala Harris probably will.
Yeah.
But you're right, I don't think she'll challenge him if he's running again.
Well, I think absolutely. If he decides not to run for whatever reason it may be, she's going to be the first one into the race.
Yeah. But you know, one needs to remember when Kamala Harris did run the first time, she was polling 4%.
She was.
Within
She
her
was
party,
doing very poorly.
and she bailed even before the Iowa caucus. And so, do the Democratic voters really like Kamala Harris? I mean, how far would she get? Even if Biden was not, just on her own out there, would she? And it was, before she had to contend with Biden and Bernie Sanders and so forth. But if they were out of the race, I'm not even convinced she would get the nomination anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think one key endorsement that plays very heavily in the Democratic Party, or I guess two of them, the power couple, are the Obamas. The Obamas, if they throw their weight behind her, I think she would clear the primary, whoever they throw their weight behind. Michelle Obama has continuously said that she does not plan on running. A lot of people have said, that they would like to see her run for president, but she's done interview after interview saying she does not plan on running. But has made no mention of, being floated as vice president. That's the first thing that I wanted to mention. But they still hold a lot of power within the party.
They do. Yeah.
The Obamas, that if they wanted to come out and, I don't know, any Joe Schmo wanted to run for Democratic president, they could pluck someone off the street and they would say, we want you guys to vote for them. Joe Schmo that they plucked off the street would win the nomination, I think.
Yeah. Well, you go back to this last midterm election, and in a lot of competitive races, who helped the Democrats win? It was him. Not
because
not
Biden stayed away. People were saying, we don't want you to come here. We want you to stay away.
Obama is revered within the Democratic Party, and you're right. His endorsements matter. But, again, even endorsing Kamala Harris, even that,
you don't think that would be enough?
I don't think so. I don't.
Well, I think she would lose against Trump.
I don't even think she could get the Democratic nomination. No, even if she had Obama behind her.
Oh, really?
I really don't think so.
Interesting.
Yeah, I really don't. I think there are a lot of Democratic voters out there that just find her fundamentally unqualified.
Sure.
I mean, what has she done as vice president to give her any type of credentials to run for president?
A lot of people find her within the Democratic Party very arrogant with the way that she laughs, that questions are asked.
And all of her staff have left. Half of her staff. Very hard to work
high
with.
Turnover.
And you're right. And she gets nervous when asked very complicated questions. And like you say, she breaks into this weird cackle that she has. And so I'm sure there are many Democratic voters who go, oh, no, absolutely not. I don't care if it's Obama endorsing her or not.
Yeah. On that point, Doctor, who I think would be a very powerful candidate?
Who's that?
Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan.
Well, she just had a big win.
She had a very big win.
Right.
I think she feels presidential. The way that she comes out onto a stage, the way she talks, the way she talks the talks, and she could walk the walk.
Yeah.
So I think she would be a very powerful candidate as well within the Democratic
think you're right.
Party.
That's true. She just beat a Trump-endorsed candidate, too. And when we're talking about nomination politics, we're not talking about the general election here.
Sure.
And we're talking about a different swath of voters, that certainly influence the outcome.
Yeah.
And she is, as you say, aligned with the progressive wing of that party.
She is.
And in primaries, as you know, where turnout is generally much lower than the general election, and caucus is very small turnout.
Yeah.
The progressives can certainly have influence if they want. And Joe Biden's campaign was on the ropes, and as you know, it was Jim Clyburn that saved him in South Carolina. But nevertheless, with Biden out of the picture, I think that the progressives in that party could maybe have a field day.
I think
really
they
do.
could.
And you mentioned Whitmer. I think that's a real perceptive observation. Yeah.
I think she would be great. And, just to throw out a few other names, three senators, I guess. Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, yeah.
Bernie Sanders. I think that he's past his prime at this point.
I think so.
He's made a few unsuccessful runs. Then we have Cory Booker from New Jersey, my home state.
Yeah, Cory Booker.
And we also have Governor Phil Murphy from New Jersey as well. A lot of people have spoken his name, I think, for president. And then finally, which he has really gone away, sort of like Kristi Noem, Mayor Pete He's the Secretary of Transportation, I believe.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
And he was the big. I mean, not that he captivated that many of those, but everyone was like, Mayor Pete, Mayor Pete.
Yeah.
When he was brought onto the Biden administration, it was a big deal.
Oh yeah.
But now it's, I feel like the news never covers him. He's like disappeared. I don't know if he's alive, if he's dead, if he's in the United States, if he's abroad. It's sort of, he's like hidden in a way.
Yeah.
And I wonder why that is. I wonder if they don't want, I don't know what it could be. So tell me your thoughts on a few of those names that I just gave.
Yeah, well, Elizabeth Warren, I can't discount her as a candidate. Mm-hmm. She has very high ambitions. Yeah. She really does. Senator from Massachusetts. And she definitely has a strong base of support within that party. And she didn't get the nomination, last time. But nevertheless, Elizabeth Warren could be, once again, a very viable candidate. Yeah. She appeals to women voters, and as you know, in the Democratic Party, that's highly influential. Mm-hmm. So I would, and she's very strong in the area of finance.
She is.
And budget matters, mm-hmm. and if in fact the economy is still troubled when this begins, her expertise in that area might seem, a welcome relief to some people. Let's see, Cory Booker. He did run last time, didn't get too far.
No.
Didn't do well. But he is still a young man, and he does have a good presence. Mm-hmm. African Americans, even though there is some realignment going on, are still heavily Democrat. And I think that Cory Booker probably could be a very strong contender for that. And I can't say he's a fresh face, but nevertheless, he's fresh enough. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You haven't heard much about him lately, though. But before the last race, there was a lot of hype.
Yeah.
But he could actually this time maybe come across as a little more experienced and seasoned. Mm-hmm. And I think people actually might see something in him that's worth rallying behind. Who else did you?
Phil Murphy.
Phil Murphy, your guy.
Jersey, yeah.
I can't say much about him because honestly I don't know that much about him. But he just barely won his election, didn't he?
We thought it was going to be a much wider margin.
So the question is, how broad is his base?
Sure.
It's okay to win an election, but normally you got to have a
presence. And
I don't really. No. I haven't heard that much. You say people are talking about him too. I've
read a few things that they've mentioned his name.
Some New Jersey newspaper. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and maybe Ned Lamont, but I mean, he had a huge win, and I don't know. I can't discount that. I can't. Actually, I mentioned that to someone the other day. That I wonder if Lamont would ever have presidential aspirations. And
now that you mention that, it's a perfect segue into my next question. Just like I did with the Republicans, whether it's Biden or Gavin Newsom, right? We'll start with Biden. Do you think Biden will keep Kamala Harris as his vice president?
Yes. Yes, I do.
You think so? You don't think there's any way that he would waver in that?
No, I don't think so.
Interesting.
I mean, you can drop a vice president. I mean, FDR had 3 different vice presidents, But in that case, no. I think, again, women voters, persons of color might feel that, even though they don't like Harris and they don't think she's qualified, they still might see that as somewhat of a discriminatory or harsh move on a woman of color. Sure. So I don't think that would play out well. Okay. Just the optics of it. You know what I mean? As opposed to the
what if
substance.
She just decided to say, you know what, I'm stepping back?
Yeah.
Then that would give.
Well, that would be different.
So let's say she did that. She said, you know what, ciao, ciao. See you on the other side.
Yeah.
Who do you think should be Biden's pick?
Oh my gosh! Well, Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. Okay.
Right there, you go.
Sure.
You go to Michigan. And,
okay.
It's becoming it's a key state in the Electoral College, and I can't say it's really a swing state, but nevertheless, it's an important state. Yeah. And so. Well, it's kind of a swing state, depending on if you go back and really look at a whole range of elections. Yeah. So I think that might be a good choice.
Yeah.
I don't know who else you would start to consider.
What about Warren?
Yeah. Who?
Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren as a running mate. That would be a very good choice also. Yeah. Again, because of her appeal to women voters in the progressive wing of the party. I think that would be a very strategic move.
Yeah.
And again, Cory Booker, maybe another one, you know? And so, so I'm sure there's more on the list that you could go through.
Yeah.
But seems like we're missing some.
Yeah.
Mayor Pete.
Mayor Pete.
Yeah, Mayor Pete.
Yeah.
You just go and pull out the transportation secretary, you know, and I think he has presidential aspirations as well. So if Biden decides not to run, I think we're going to see him certainly jumping in. And he got a lot. He did pretty well. You know, he had some real high marks last time.
Well, considering that he was at that time just a mayor.
Just a mayor.
Because that's all he was. You know, that's the only position he had held. I thought, you know, I found that very interesting.
Yeah.
And
he wasn't a very successful mayor either, quite frankly, when you really look at his record. Yeah.
And let me ask you, you know, for the same for Gavin Newsom, you know, I think that if right now there would be anyone that could topple Biden, I think a lot of people could with his approval rating, the way that he's going. But one big name that's out there, you know, that a lot of people are throwing weight behind is Newsom.
Oh, yeah.
Who would be his running mate?
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh.
I think if it would be me, I think a good matchup would be him and Warren.
Yeah. West and East.
Yeah.
California, Massachusetts, male, female. That might be. Yeah, you know, there'd be a time where I would say, well, you know, a liberal governor should pick a centrist Democrat. But my problem with that scenario now is, well, who's that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not sure there are many left.
Yeah, I don't think there are either.
No. I mean, that party has definitely moved to the left.
Yeah.
So I think Warren would be a good choice. But, you know, again, Cory Booker. His name's got to be on the list again.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's a possibility.
I'm trying to think of who else would be. Oh, what about? And I don't know what state he's the governor in, but Pritzker, is it JD? No, JB Pritzker. Oh, I'm gonna have to look this up because it's gonna drive me crazy.
Not sure who we're talking about there.
Yeah.
Tester from Montana.
No, J. Robert. It's loading here. Of course, the connection is not working. Pritzker, he's the governor of Illinois. This guy.
Pritzker. Oh, you don't hear anything about him.
No, but he just won his election big time.
But quite well, not surprising in Illinois. But
yeah.
Quite frankly, I don't know much about him.
No.
I really don't.
Okay. No. That's the only, for governors, that's really the only person that comes to him and Gretchen are the only two.
Does he get any press at all, this Illinois governor?
He's been recently, he has been with the election stuff.
Yeah, I can't say I know anything about him, to be honest with you.
But I'm trying to, because down south you really don't have a lot of Democratic governors that could really come in. Oh, I think we've missed a huge person. Stacey Abrams.
She didn't win.
No, I know, but what about her for a running mate for vice president? You think? I don't think she doesn't have the experience.
Yeah, but she lost twice.
She has lost twice.
Yeah.
But you know, there always seems to be this rally.
Well, I know.
I don't know what it is.
And recently she lost in a big way too.
Yeah, she did.
So her name didn't come to my mind.
No.
I don't think I would recommend her. I'm sure there's more. Oh, how about what's his name? Oh God Almighty, Rourke.
But come on, he's lost too.
Yeah,
he's lost the first one against Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz, and then he ran for governor.
He got blown out of the waters.
O'Rourke.
Beto O'Rourke. I don't think that he has the, you know, I don't know. What about like a Kristen Sinema? What about her?
Senator from Arizona.
Yeah.
Well, there's your moderate.
That's your moderate.
There's your moderate. Yeah. And then you got Joe Manchin too.
Joe Manchin. But I don't know.
What do you think? I don't know though.
If I were to pick a moderate.
But here's the problem though with that again is Sinema, moderate Democrat. But of course, you know, well, that's an interesting strategy because you pick the running mate normally after the primaries anyway. So she wouldn't be a drag on the candidacy of someone trying to get the nomination, because if they knew that she was going to be the running mate, that could be a problem. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Newsom and Sinema.
Yeah. Well, you just name somebody who does have somewhat of a moderate reputation.
She's moderate. You know, she's had the ability to work with Republicans.
Yeah.
Not only are her stance is moderate, but she really has reached across the aisle to be able to do these things. Yeah,
they're interesting. Yeah, very possible.
Yeah.
But
off the top of my head, I don't know.
But some
why,
of her votes in the Senate, though, have alienated a lot of Democrats.
They have.
Yeah. So,
but I can't really think of any other Democrat that comes to mind that I'm like, oh, I would like to see them.
I'm sure there's some I'm not thinking of. My mind is scanning.
Yeah.
But the
what about a name that has been thrown out, was sort of blacklisted?
Oh, no.
But I think they're trying to weave their way back into politics. Cuomo from New York.
Oh God, really? You think so?
I think he's trying
after that scandal.
I think he's trying to weave his way back.
Run out of office, basically.
But I think that I don't know. I think that there's something with that name that if you have a Newsom Cuomo, you have two, or he was a big powerhouse governor. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Even though he really was, he was run out of office. But
there's all that sexual harassment accusations.
I know.
Do you think that would play out well among Democrats?
I don't think it would, but I think that the Democrats have a way of sweeping a lot of things under the rug.
Well, with Bill Clinton, they did that.
You have a lot of these big scandals that go away. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting, but I don't know. I mean, his days, I think, in politics,
are done.
Yeah, I think so. I do. I think that I think the party has moved on from the Cuomos.
So. Okay.
And his father was legendary.
Yeah.
But he was, and then there's Chris too, the brother, who
Yes.
was in media, and he was kind of run out of. I don't even know what he
CNN,
does anymore.
Yeah. He has a show. I don't know. I think it's online. I don't really know what his
streaming
deal
show or
is.
something. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And then Andrew himself, he was the attorney general there, and then he governor, pretty successful for a while. But then during the pandemic, a lot of controversy. Then the sexual harassment. I mean, do you really want somebody like that on the ticket with you?
That's true.
Yeah. But again,
I was just throwing a name
well, no,
out
but
there.
you raise a good point because Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
He was a presidential candidate and elected twice, and there was a whole range of women who have accused him of things, including one who accused Clinton of rape.
Yeah.
And you're right, he continued on.
Yeah.
And he was impeached in 98, and his public approval ratings actually went up.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, check that out.
I'm going to have to,
check that out. His approval ratings rose after he was impeached.
Interesting.
And that was for lying about his relationship with an intern,
Yeah. Monica Lewinsky.
That was with Monica Lewinsky, yeah.
Interesting. Now that we have all this talk about the primary, I think, to jump back into Trump, his effect on the party. I think he's had a negative effect, and I know we've mentioned it, I think, in the first episode, the episode that's going to be released very soon. We've talked about it, and it's just a negative effect overall. And here I have some numbers from Politico. He made some picks in this election. Some of them were risky, and he made, there's 3 races remaining. So there were 9 victories he had, 9 defeats, and again, 3 races remaining.
Okay.
In the Senate, for lean Republican, he won 2 out of 2, which was J.D. Vance, Ohio Senate, and Ted Budd, North Carolina Senate. But they were lean Republicans, so I think they would have gone, either way. Then when we look at the toss-ups in the Senate, you had Ron Johnson, who only won by one vote, by 1 point.
Just got in,
Was the only one, and that was Wisconsin Senate. Then you have Blake Masters, which was beat by 5 points, and that was in Arizona. And then you also have Mehmet Oz, 5 points in Pennsylvania. And I know we mentioned it in the last episode that's going to be released soon. And, I'll say it again. He's my neighbor. He had no reason, no rhyme or reason to be running in the state of Pennsylvania.
That's amazing. I know you said
courts.
That. I know.
It's a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
And then the last one that we have in the Senate, which is a toss-up, and we still don't know, is Herschel Walker. He's going to a runoff in the Georgia Senate.
Oh, yes.
And I think Trump announcing his candidacy is
toxic.
going to be very toxic.
It's toxic.
It's going to do more harm than good.
Yep.
And quite frankly, we're going to see the Senate be 51-49.
I think it's a very reasonable prediction.
I have no doubt about it. Then if we look at the House, a lot of losses here. In lean Democratic districts, 0 out of 3. One of them is we still don't know the result. It's the Sarah Palin election for the at-large seat in Alaska.
Yeah.
Then for the toss-ups, we have 0 out of 3. In Ohio 13, North Carolina 13, Pennsylvania 8. All 3 of them lost. And then when we look lean Republican, again, I think these candidates would have won with or without Trump's endorsement.
Probably.
You have one in Texas, Monica de la Cruz, won by 9 points. Iowa, Ashley Hinson by 8 points. Eli Crane in Arizona by 8. Ken Calvert by 4 in California. David Schwickert by 1 point in Arizona as well. And then another one in Iowa by 1 point, Zach Nunn. And there was only one loss, Joe Kent in Washington. It was lean Republican, but the Democrat won by 1 point. So I think that, I don't know, I think he has, he goes out there, he says, his supporters say, oh, Trump endorsements for the win. He endorsed, people, I don't know, I would assume that he would have endorsed someone like Kay Ivey down in Alabama. She's going to win no matter what. It doesn't matter if he makes the endorsement or what. She's wildly popular.
And Ohio, too. J.D. Vance
Ohio,
would have
won.
He would have won with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
So I think that his people, and he credits himself more than he should.
Of course.
And than they should.
Well, not only that, but, when he declared his candidacy at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
He actually was lying to the crowd, which really was like right out of the gate, where he said, I forgot what figure he cited, but an extremely high percentage of people that he supported, have all won.
Which is, it's not true. It's a blatant lie.
It's not true at all. It isn't. And there he is already lying like
just
that.
Here, and these are the figures of key races.
Yeah.
This doesn't get down into the nitty gritty. These are key races that were competitive.
Yep.
It's 50-50.
Yeah.
He won 50 of them, lost 50 of them, and there's 3 outstanding.
And the question is, did he really win?
No, he didn't. These are candidates that would have won. The winners would have won with or without him,
That's right. Most of them.
The losers, I think, could have won without his endorsement.
Without him.
So I think he does more harm than good, Dr.
Well,
Rose.
he does, and I think we talked about this in the last podcast.
Yeah.
And I feel right now, although he does have a base within the party, nevertheless, when it comes to congressional candidates who are going to be running in 2024 and Senate candidates too, Trump is toxic.
Yes.
I'd
want him to stay away.
Yes, that's
right.
If
I were running for Senate, for Congress, for anything, for governor, especially in 2024, where people tend to do down ballot, I'd be shaking in my boots.
He is toxic. That's right. He's not who you want endorsing you. You're correct, Alejandro. I think he's going to cost Herschel Walker the possibility of winning that race down there. Yeah. I do. But he doesn't care.
He doesn't.
Well, that's the whole thing about him.
He's vain. And then he'll go out and he'll say, when Herschel loses, things were stacked against him. The same lines that he uses. It was stacked against him. The media's against him. They're against me. Come on. We need to get over this.
He doesn't care.
No,
he really doesn't.
Quite frankly, he doesn't.
Just like Chris Christie said at the convention there, the Las Vegas convention, that we have to stop being the party of me and be the party of we.
Yeah. And now that we touched upon that, we saw January 6th, which was an atrocity. Again, I think it was one of the darkest days in our democracy in recent times. Of course, what are the dangers of a Trump presidency again? What are your thoughts on that?
Constant antagonism, constant division within the country. And this is not to defend the press, but obviously every move is going to be watched and criticized by the mainstream media, which isn't fair, I realize, but that's going to structure public opinion. Yeah. And I just think it's going to be a very difficult time if he wins the presidency. It's going to be it's not going to be at all like the first term.
No, I think it'll be very tumultuous for years.
Total tumult, and there was as the first. Remember how many chiefs of staff he went through. Yeah. But I just think that the animosity towards Trump that is so deep now in this country after January 6th. It's far deeper than what people felt, when he first ran. that the American people, I think, if he was to be inaugurated, would be so many people demoralized about the state of our democracy.
Yeah.
And like, my God, is this what the American people wanted? This again? And that to me would be really troubling to watch.
Absolutely.
Whereas I think with the other candidates that we're talking about, there could be a fresh start.
I think
and there would be a honeymoon. There would be a period of goodwill. But there would be no honeymoon, no goodwill, nothing. And it would just be nothing but just, a feeling of disdain, and I think there'd be a lot of depression out there too. That people would think that the American people were so subject to manipulation by this guy. Yeah. So that would be, to me, it would be an even darker day than perhaps January 6th.
Yeah.
And as you well know, I've run field trips to inaugurations, and I've been to 8 of them, and to sit out there and to watch that, I would go, wow, what's this country becoming?
Yeah.
And then we just had an insurrection largely attributed to him.
Yeah.
And he's up there again,
I know.
being inaugurated?
Yeah.
How could I possibly feel good about our democratic system if I'd watched that? And I'm sure millions would feel the same way.
Yeah. No, I know. I think, and you know where I stand politically, I would not vote for him. I wouldn't. I think I would vote for, a third party candidate. I would even vote for the Democrat, and not for him.
You'd vote for Gavin Newsom.
That sounds a little scary. But I think that we get more bad than good out of Trump. It's, and I'm sitting here and I try to wrap my mind over, the things that happened in his very last days. Very sad. Not American.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It's I sat there January 6th, watching that, and I never forget, it was, someone had told me, you have to turn on the TV. I was at work, and they said, turn on the TV, something crazy's happening. And I said, something crazy? And they're like, yeah, there's riots happening in D.C. And I said, riots in D.C.?
Right. Yeah,
I thought of that, and I know. My first thought was, I think there might have been someone that had just been killed recently by a police officer. So that was my first thought was, Black Lives Matter might be protesting, one of those groups. And when I turned on the TV in our office and I saw that it was Trump's people and that it was Trump giving speeches, my heart hurt so much.
I know, yeah.
So I said, this is not a reason to be protesting, to be rioting, to be throwing bricks into a building, to be hurting police officers. This is not okay. So I really don't know, Dr. Rose.
No, I know. Peggy Noonan always writes a very good column in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
And she said something really interesting in this week's. She said, think of this. What if it was Barack Obama who did not concede that election?
Yeah.
And what if it was Barack Obama's supporters who stormed the Capitol? Yeah. Think of what you would be thinking as an American.
Yeah.
An African-American president, you know what I mean? And all the animus that's out there.
Yeah.
What would a lot of the white people be thinking in this
They'd be
country
up in arms
if they saw that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's what Peggy was saying is,
I think that's a really good point.
Reverse it now and think of what would you be thinking?
Yeah.
And so how could you wouldn't support that by any means. How can you support what he did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
That was a very good point you raised.
That is a good point, Dr. Rose, made by her.
Yeah. Peggy writes good stuff.
Yeah. But I don't know. We'll have to see what the future brings. I don't know where we'll be at. The last thing that I really wanted to touch upon, and it's, a quick, more of a statement than anything, is Twitter.
Yes,
Elon Musk bought Twitter. Elon Musk has brought back Trump on Twitter.
Yes, I saw that.
Trump has said, I'm staying on Truth Social or whatever his app is, which is doing very poorly, by the way, contrary to what he'll say.
Doesn't reach anywhere near what Twitter
does not, does not reach the same amount of people. It does not have the same popularity. It's just, it's not, anything. It's more of his people. It's, all these QAnon people and whatnot, the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the Republican Party going onto this app. Your normal everyday person doesn't have an account. So he's now brought back to Twitter.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Him having this platform again, even though according to him he will not be coming back to the platform.
Well, that's what he says.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of time before he is on Twitter again. Hey, even on my syllabi, I say, I strongly endorse free speech and freedom of expression. So to me, that's fine.
Yeah.
And Musk owns the company now, and if he's allowing Trump back on, then I'd say that's a good move, because I don't think anybody should be censored.
Yeah.
And it is the public square that we're talking about, and so let him in.
Yeah.
And and you're going to be taking a senior seminar with me in the spring where we study the First Amendment, and you're going to come across what Oliver Wendell Holmes called the marketplace of ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that if having Trump out there, that's fine. Mm-hmm. It's more, more ideas to choose from, and that's the way our republic should be. So I'm perfectly fine with him getting, if he does come back onto Twitter, which I think he will.
Yeah.
And I'd say the more ideas, the better, Alejandro. I think it's good for democracy, and I'm glad he's being allowed back on. Probably, and quite frankly, I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not even on social media. I don't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But
I think we need to get you on Facebook.
No, not me either. No. I'm on email. That's it. And but I say the marketplace of ideas is really what should govern that. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think that wraps up this week's episode, Dr. Rose. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure having these conversations with you and sitting around, at this table and bouncing these ideas off of each other. For next week's podcast, we're going to be talking about the division in the country. I know it's, a lot of these themes sort of roll into one another, but we'll be talking about the division of the country. We'll be looking at exit polls from the midterms, where certain demographics fall, gender, sex, race, level of education, socioeconomic level, all these little things that one may not think of when thinking about politics. It's something that we're going to be covering in the upcoming episode, and I think that'll be a very exciting thing, Dr. Rose, for us to talk about. We'll have the exit polls from NBC, is it?
Yeah, NBC.
Yeah, NBC exit
they're
polls.
really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll be having that. But with that, thank you again for tuning into the Rose Political Podcast, everyone. We always welcome you to like, comment, and subscribe to our page. We're looking forward to putting out a lot of good content over the next year. And thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next week.